Hey guys, what's up? This is Tyler from Animator Kid. About a year ago, I made a video exploring the technology featured in Fringe's alternate universe. Part of that video was dedicated to exploring an alternate progression of Moore's Law. In this collaboration with the mind of Lewis, I'm going to ask the question, what would it be like if Moore's Law was faster?
Hey guys, mind of Lewis here. Thanks for having me again, Tyler. For those who are not familiar with Moore's Law states that on a microchip, the number of transistors per square inch doubles every 24 months, and that overall computing power doubles every 18 months. In this video, we will explore what would happen if this progression was shifted so that the number of transistors doubled every 18 months and computing power doubled yearly.
Now, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that this alternate progression might drive many of the innovations seen in Fringe's alternate universe, but this video won't focus specifically on Fringe, and will merely explore the changes that would occur in our world if computers were twice as fast.
It's worth stating that the reason Moore's Law has traced this path in our timeline is most likely because of economics. Ever since Intel developed its first microchip, the Intel 4004 in 1971, the number of transistors have doubled roughly every 2 years. This is in line with Gordon Moore and David House's prediction in the early 1970s.
The reason chips are not faster today isn't necessarily because we couldn't manufacture them, but because it's not as economical to do so. This is what largely fuels private investment in R&D regarding microchip size, since these predictions are mostly for the commercial market.
In fact, recently, companies such as Intel have seen a deceleration of Moore's Law, with advances in microprocessor units slowing down steadily since the early 2010s, since the engineering required is more and more advanced.
However, any fears about Moore's Law dying in the next few years are largely unfounded, since Intel has announced development of 10, 7, and 5 nanometer chips over the next few years. Additionally, predictions about the continuation of increases in computing power are linked to advances in artificial intelligence, with many analysts predicting a singularity that could happen within the next few decades.
So, as we demonstrated, the main reason for microprocessors only being advanced as they are is largely tied to dollars. This isn't to say that the private market isn't the best medium for creating faster chips, since returns on private investment compels companies to create better products, driving innovation.
Therefore, any timeline that features an alternate advancement of Moore's Law has to have some outside factor to drive it. In this scenario, the formula to calculate the advancement of computing power will be used to calculate changes in semiconductor size instead, with computer power becoming faster as a result.
The point of the divergence for this scenario will be in the mid-1960s, which is when advances in integrated circuits began to accelerate, with transistors doubling every year. Moore predicted that in 1965 that this rate of growth will continue for another decade, but had to revise it. Well, if he only had to revise it, let's say 25% instead of 50%.
I've mentioned in multiple videos that the US Navy had developed a microchip for use in its F-14 Tomcat fighter jet, a year before Intel released the 4004. This chip was not only faster, but proved that R&D in the public sector could turn over some interesting results.
Of course, this alone didn't prompt computer technologies to advance quicker than the private market, since chips was single purpose. In order for microchips to advance more quickly, we need massive products of funding for such technologies outside of what the private corporation has. Even wholly Intel could invest.
According to one user on AlternateHistory.com, one thing that could fuel this advancement is a major war, since military technology in the past has boosted industrial development. This would take the form of more money going into defense technologies, which is likely what happened in Fringe.
As a result, the technology developed for military use eventually trickled down into the civilian sector, as has happened with things like GPS, cell phone networks. Early public investment in building faster microchips would allow RAM prices to fall at a faster rate, allowing companies like Intel to follow suits and invest money in faster chips to match those made by the government.
Starting in 1971, this would allow tech companies to ship devices using these chips at an earlier date than was possible in our timeline. For example, whereas chips using over 100,000 transistors wouldn't appear until the early 1980s, now they'd appear by the late 70s.
However, the result became more and more dramatic as the years went by. By the mid-1980s, we had computers as powerful as the early 1990s. This would have been equivalent to the Macintosh Classic, with 1 meg of RAM existing when computers barely had half a meg.
Of course, it gets even crazier once we venture into the 1990s. By the end of the first Bush administration, high-definition TV would start to become standard, an occurrence nearly a decade removed from our timeline. Soon, CRT screens on new computers would be on their way out, which didn't happen until the early 2000s in our timeline.
By the mid-90s, digital cell phones like the Motorola Razr would have been popular. In our timeline, This did not occur until around 2005. Also, backup cameras in cars would start to be commonplace, which also took until the mid-2000s to happen in our world.
By the end of the decade, things like tabletop computing would enter the commercial market 10 years before they do in our history. Not too long after that, quad-core smart devices would enter the mainstream a decade early due to advances in computing power.
In our history, the quest for faster clock speeds by ordinary processors stalled during the mid-2000s. Due to technical limitations. This is why Apple switched to Intel processors in 2006, rather than continuing to use the liquid-cooled PowerPC processors due to the advantage of multi-core systems.
The early 2000s would see an explosion in touchscreen technology, including tablets, smartphones, and other devices. 4G networks would appear a decade earlier than in our timeline, and concepts like cloud computing would enter the mainstream much earlier as well.
Interestingly, we might also see an influx of devices using electronic paper. In our world, the Eaton Corporation partnered with Philips in 1999 to develop and market electronic paper using electrophoretic displays. Unfortunately, this didn't work out because they were too difficult to manufacture.
In a timeline where semiconductors are 10 years more advanced, however, this process might not have failed as miserably as it did in our world. Thus, we might see e-readers and bendable displays become more popular years before they would in our world.
At first, these displays would be monochrome, but advances in electrofluidic displays would yield colored electronic paper by the middle of the decade, even though it's taken until 2017 to do the same in our world.
Of course, computer technology wouldn't be the only thing that would benefit from these advancements. Cancer research could benefit heavily from more advanced imaging techniques to spot tumors early and simulate treatments with more accuracy.
Obviously, this wouldn't be the only factor advancing for the fields of medicine, as it certainly wouldn't cure the diseases by 2018, but it could reduce the number of deaths and yield a near 75% 10-year survival rate, which isn't expected to happen until 2026.
By the early 2010s, we could see an explosion in self-driving cars and other self-driving vehicles to a higher degree than even today. Ultra-high definition televisions, up to 4320p or 8K, will be common in homes by Obama's first term, and we could see advances in synthetic organ transplants earlier as well.
In this alternate timeline, technology of this year would be roughly equivalent to the technology of the year 2032. Assuming that the trend continues for whatever reason, 6G technology would be on the horizon, nanotech clothing would be a commonplace, 3D printing would be a consumer technology, robotic hands would be used with amputees, full weather modeling would be perfected, and supercomputers could simulate hundreds of human brains in 1 second.
However, all things must come to an end. By the 2010s decade of this alternate reality, traditional microchips would be reaching the limits of miniaturization. Silicon would no longer be a viable element for building transistors due to the effects of quantum tunneling. Thus, graphene would become the dominant element for creating circuits, with other novel concepts being required to continue Moore's law as well.
Well, thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and comment, and don't forget to share it. Also, be sure to check out my channel, The Mind of Lewis, link in the description below.
If you want to support me on Patreon, click the element on the end screen. Don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget to be awesome. Hey guys, hope you enjoyed the video, but don't go anywhere yet. I just want to give you a more in-depth explanation of the perks you'll receive if you support me on Patreon. Of course, as most of you know, Patreon is a monthly-based subscription service as opposed to a one-time donation site like Indiegogo or Kickstarter, GoFundMe, or any of that. Of course, there are different tiers that you can pledge. If you pledge at the $1 level, you get access to patron-only content, sneak peek photos of upcoming releases, patron-only polls, and credit at the end of all my videos each month. And if you pledge at the $5 level, with this tier, you receive exclusive behind-the-scenes content such as unreleased images, video, audio, etc., plus all the previously listed awards. If you pledge at the $10 or month level, then you're going all out, but you get a personalized thank you video because I'm at this point so much beholden to you. I'll send it to you to your Patreon inbox, which you can access on the site. If you pledge $20 or more a month, I'll do a Patreon Q&A live stream in which I'll answer questions as well as take video suggestions, and obviously thank you guys so much for supporting me at that level, plus all the previously listed awards. If you pledge at the $50 level, you get a personalized video topic that I will do based on your suggestion. Obviously it has to be within reason, within the guidelines, YouTube guidelines, Patreon guidelines. I'll be beholden to your support though. Just message me on the site, plus all the previously listed awards. Now there's actually 3 different goal limits that I have placed on this Patreon site. If you support me at the $250 level, which is the lowest one, that's pretty standard for people on the site. If I can reach that level, then that money will go towards equipment and funding my new film project with fellow members of my network, the Orange River Network. For more information, you can visit my website, link in the description. This money will also go towards supporting other creators on Patreon, which you can view the creators that I support on the sidebar on the Patreon site. If you support me at the $2,000 level per month, then that is roughly equivalent to a living wage in the state of Tennessee. That's based on rough estimates. But with this money, I'll be able to invest in other projects besides my own current videos, possibly a true independent film that I can use to get my name exposed, such as, submitting it to a festival like Indie Memphis. And finally, if you support me at the $4,000 level, this one's pretty lofty, but I can not only afford to financially support myself, but also at least one or two other people, such as video editors, script writers, researchers, promoters, etc. And those are all the perks that you get if you support me on Patreon. So don't forget to click the link, the end screen, somewhere probably on the page right now. Thank you guys so much for watching, and don't forget to be awesome.